Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Mecca, a beacon of faith for millions, hums with the fervor of pilgrims performing Hajj. But beneath the pious facade lurks a sinister truth, a hidden network exploiting the pilgrimage for personal gain. KABBA, who controls the Holy Land? Written and produced by Matroid Movies. The relentless desert sun beat down on Mecca, turning the white marble of the Grand Mosque into a shimmering mirage. Omar, a wisp of a man in his freshly pressed police uniform, adjusted the mirrored sunglasses perched precariously on his nose. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the thin cotton fur that clung to his lean frame. This was his first Hajj duty, a prestigious honor for a rookie like him. Yet, amidst the throngs of pilgrims circling the KABBA, the holiest site in Islam, a disquiet gnawed at him. Hajj, the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, was a sight to behold. A kaleidoscope of cultures and ethnicities swirled around the KABBA, a seamless tapestry woven from faith. Yet, Omar couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It wasn't the fervent prayers or the rhythmic chants of Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik, here I am, O God, here I am, that unsettled him. It was the subtle shifts in the crowd, the fleeting glances exchanged between seemingly ordinary pilgrims. His training kicked in. He focused on his surroundings, his gaze flitting across the sea of white Iram garments. A group of 4 men caught his eye. They stood out not by their attire, but by their demeanor. Their movements were practiced, efficient, their eyes constantly darting around, a stark contrast to the pilgrims lost in prayer or contemplation. One man, taller and broader than the others, adjusted a worn leather satchel beneath his Iram. It bulged slightly, an anomaly in the flowing white robes. Omar's pulse quickened. He'd heard rumors, whispers amongst seasoned officers of criminal elements exploiting the anonymity and chaos of Hajj. But such whispers were often dismissed as paranoia. Still, something about these men screamed trouble. Casually, Omar began weaving through the crowd, mimicking the slow, shuffling gait of the elderly pilgrims around him. He kept the group in his peripheral vision, careful not to draw attention. They moved with a purpose, navigating the densely packed crowd with an ease that suggested familiarity with the labyrinthine layout of the mosque. The circumambulation, tawaf, took them around the KABBA 7 times. Omar followed at a discreet distance, the rhythmic chants and prayers a constant murmur in his ears. With each circuit, his unease grew. The men never faltered, their movements synchronized, their gazes never lingering on the holy site for more than a cursory moment. This wasn't devotion, it was a practiced routine. Finally, on the 7th circuit, as the pilgrims prepared for the next ritual, the drinking of holy water from the Zamzam well, the group made a sharp turn. They slipped into a narrow passage that led away from the main concourse, a passage Omar vaguely recognized from his training manuals. It was a service entrance, rarely used by pilgrims, leading to a maze of tunnels beneath the mosque. Curiosity warring with caution, Omar quickened his pace. He couldn't let them disappear into the bowels of the mosque, but as he reached the entrance, a large, gruff pilgrim with a bushy white beard blocked his way. Only authorized personnel allowed, the man rumbled, his gaze suspicious. Omar fumbled for his identification card, his heart hammering against his ribs. "New officer, sir. Lost my bearings." The man scrutinized the ID, his brow furrowed. Just as Omar thought his cover was blown, the gruff pilgrim grunted and stepped aside. "Stick to the main path, rookie." Relief washed over Omar. He mumbled a thank you and slipped past the man, his heart pounding, a frantic tattoo in his chest. He had to see where these men were going, but venturing into an unauthorized area, especially during Hajj, was a serious offense. Yet, the unsettling certainty that something sinister was afoot propelled him forward. He took a deep breath, plunged into the cool, dimly lit passage, and the familiar whispers of the desert wind were replaced by an unsettling silence. Chapter 2. The oppressive darkness of the service tunnel was a stark contrast to the sun-drenched plaza above. Omar pressed on, his hand trailing along the damp, cool stone wall for guidance. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and stale incense, the only sound the rhythmic echo of his own footsteps. His heart hammered, a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Venturing into unauthorized areas, especially during Hajj, was a serious offense, but the image of the four men, their purposeful strides and bulging satchel, fueled his determination. He had to see where they were leading him. The tunnel narrowed, forcing him to hunch over. The silence was broken only by the occasional drip of water and the skittering of unseen creatures. Claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm him, but he pressed on, fueled by a growing sense of urgency. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber. A single, flickering oil lamp cast long, distorted shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The air was thick with the acrid smell of sweat and stale tobacco. In the center of the chamber, huddled around a low table, were the four men Omar had been following. Their ihram garments were discarded, replaced by nondescript travel clothes. Stacks of Saudi riyals, the local currency, lay scattered on the table, along with several passports and a collection of glinting objects, jewelry, by the look of it. One of the men, the tall, broad-shouldered one Omar had noticed earlier, was meticulously counting the money. His face, devoid of the piety he had displayed during the tawaf, was etched with a ruthless efficiency. Another man, younger and wiry, was examining the passports, his brow furrowed in concentration. A third man, older and portly, wiped his brow with a soiled handkerchief. "We can't keep doing this," he wheezed. "The risk is too great. Someone's bound to notice eventually." The leader, the man counting the money, slammed a fist on the table, scattering the riyals. "We can't afford to stop now," he growled. "We have too many investors depending on us." "Investors?" Omar repeated silently, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Hajj was a sacred pilgrimage, not some venture capitalist scheme. The fourth man, the one who had been adjusting the satchel earlier, spoke up for the first time. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. "There's another group arriving tonight. They have something special they need us to move." "Special?" the older man echoed, his voice laced with unease. The leader gave a humorless laugh. "Don't worry, Yusuf. We handle special all the time. Just another package for our friends on the outside." Omar's blood ran cold. These weren't petty thieves preying on unsuspecting pilgrims. This was something far more sinister, a well-oiled operation exploiting the sanctity of Hajj for their own nefarious purposes. He had stumbled upon a criminal underbelly thriving beneath the holy city, but what exactly were they smuggling? And who were these investors the leader had mentioned? The question swirled in his mind, a tangled mess he desperately needed to untangle. Suddenly, a scraping sound echoed from the tunnel entrance. The four men froze, their faces etched with fear. Omar pressed himself back against the wall, his heart hammering a frantic tattoo in his chest. Had someone discovered him? A weathered face peeked into the chamber, framed by a flickering lantern. It was an old man, his eyes rheumy with age. He gave a curt nod to the leader and shuffled deeper into the chamber, carrying a large sack slung over his shoulder. Relief washed over Omar. It was just another delivery, but the sight of the bulging sack only deepened his resolve. He had to expose this operation, to unravel the web of deceit that had ensnared the holy city. As the old man unloaded his cargo, an assortment of dusty carpets and trinkets, Omar knew his job had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. He was no longer just a rookie officer on his first Hajj duty. He was an undercover investigator, a lone wolf in a den of vipers, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Chapter 3. Omar crouched in the shadows, his mind racing. The cavernous chamber pulsed with a hidden life, a stark contrast to the piety displayed above in the Grand Mosque. The men, their pious facade discarded, were now a chilling tableau of greed and ruthlessness. Their conversation about investors and special packages echoed in his ears, painting a picture of a criminal syndicate operating under the cloak of Hajj. He needed a plan. Exposing himself now would be a suicide mission. He had to find a way to gather evidence, to understand the scope of this clandestine operation, without blowing his cover. His gaze fell on the old man who had delivered the seemingly innocuous carpets and trinkets. The man, frail and unassuming, seemed like an anomaly in this den of thieves. Perhaps, Omar thought, he was the key. The men were busy dividing the loot, their voices raised in a heated argument. Using the commotion as a distraction, Omar slipped out of the chamber and back into the narrow tunnel. He moved cautiously, his senses on high alert. The silence was broken only by the dripping of water and the distant hum of the mosque above. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller and less well-maintained than the first. A single, flickering bulb cast an eerie glow on a rickety cot and a makeshift table overflowing with tools and odds and ends. This must have been the old man's living quarters, a meager existence on the fringes of the criminal enterprise. Omar hesitated. Approaching the old man directly was risky, but it was his only lead. He took a deep breath and stepped into the chamber. The old man, startled by the sound, looked up from his work, a pair of spectacles perched precariously on his nose. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in suspicion. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice surprisingly strong for his frail frame. "Officer Omar," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I need your help." The old man's face remained a mask of suspicion. Omar quickly explained what he had witnessed: the stolen goods, the hushed conversation about investors. He emphasized the desecration of the holy city, the betrayal of faith. The old man listened intently, his gaze flickering between Omar and the flickering bulb. When Omar finished, a long silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, the old man spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "They call themselves KABBA," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A serpent with its nest beneath the holiest site. They use us, the pilgrims, as a shield, a cloak for their darkness." Omar felt a jolt of confirmation. KABBA, a name whispered in hushed tones by his superiors, dismissed as mere rumor. Now, here it was, a venomous snake slithering through the heart of Mecca. The old man continued, his voice laced with a bitter resignation. He spoke of a network that stretched beyond Mecca, of powerful figures who lined their pockets with the spoils of KABBA's crimes. He spoke of fear, of threats, of the helplessness of those caught in the web. As the old man spoke, Omar realized he wasn't just dealing with a criminal organization. He was facing a well-established network, a house of mirrors where piety masked corruption and fear silenced dissent. Taking them down wouldn't be easy. It would require more than just his courage and knife. He needed help, but who could he trust in this city teeming with pilgrims and hidden agendas? A single wrong move could expose him, and KABBA wouldn't hesitate to silence a loose end. The weight of his newfound responsibility settled on his shoulders. He was a lone wolf facing a pack of wolves, but he wouldn't back down. He had a duty to protect the sanctity of Hajj, to expose the darkness that festered beneath the holy city. "I can help you," the old man said, his voice surprisingly firm. "But it will be dangerous. Are you prepared for that, young officer?" Omar looked into the old man's eyes that held a lifetime of hardship and a flicker of defiance. He straightened his back, a newfound resolve hardening his gaze. "Yes," he said, his voice unwavering. "I am." In the flickering light of the bulb, a silent pact was forged. Omar, the idealistic rookie, and the old man, a prisoner in his own city, were bound by a shared purpose to tear down the house of mirrors and expose the truth at the heart of KABBA. Chapter 4. The weight of the old man's words hung heavy on Omar. KABBA wasn't just a criminal syndicate, it was a hydra-headed monster with its tendrils reaching far beyond the confines of the tunnels. Taking it down would require a delicate dance, gathering evidence without alerting the serpent, and finding an ally within the system who wouldn't dismiss his claims as youthful paranoia. The old man, who introduced himself as Hassan, offered a glimmer of hope. He outlined the inner workings of KABBA, that investors were a mix of corrupt officials and wealthy individuals who financed the operation in exchange for a hefty cut of the profits. The stolen goods, disguised as religious souvenirs, were smuggled out through a network of seemingly devout pilgrims. Hassan couldn't offer names, fearing retribution from KABBA's ruthless enforcers, but he did offer something invaluable: access. He revealed a hidden passage within his quarters that led directly to the service corridors beneath the Grand Mosque, a labyrinth known only to a select few. Omar's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This passage offered a way to observe KABBA's operations undetected, a chance to gather concrete evidence. But venturing into these service corridors during Hajj was a gamble. One wrong turn, one encounter with an authorized worker, and his cover would be blown. The following morning, amidst the throngs of pilgrims performing tawaf, Omar slipped away, following Hassan into the hidden passage. The damp, cool air of the tunnel was a welcome respite from the searing desert sun. They navigated a maze of twisting corridors, the rhythmic murmur of prayers a constant drone from the world above. Finally, they emerged into a hidden alcove overlooking a bustling service corridor. Carts laden with supplies whizzed past, cleaners mopped the marble floors, and security personnel patrolled with a practiced vigilance. From his vantage point, Omar could see a discreet entrance leading to the chamber he had discovered, the nerve center of KABBA's operation. Over the next few days, Omar became a silent observer. He witnessed the meticulous exchange of stolen goods, the hushed conversations veiled in religious jargon. He saw the fear in the eyes of the pilgrims who transported the contraband, their devotion a mere facade for a desperate act of survival. He documented everything: sketches of the chamber layout, descriptions of the stolen goods, notes on the KABBA members' interactions. The evidence was mounting, painting a damning picture of a criminal enterprise thriving in the holiest city. But amidst the chaos, Omar noticed something unsettling. One of the KABBA members, a lean man with a piercing gaze, kept glancing towards the alcove where he and Hassan were hidden. Omar felt a prickle of unease. Had he been spotted? Was KABBA onto them? One afternoon, during a particularly busy period, Omar saw his worst fear come true. The lean man, accompanied by another KABBA member, approached the alcove entrance. Omar and Hassan exchanged a panicked look. There was nowhere to hide. Just as the men reached the entrance, a commotion erupted from the service corridor. A fight had broken out between two groups of cleaners, their shouts echoing through the tunnels. The KABBA members hesitated, their attention diverted by the altercation. Using the distraction as a window of opportunity, Omar and Hassan scurried deeper into the labyrinth, their hearts hammering against their ribs. Adrenaline coursed through Omar's veins. They had been lucky this time, but their cover remained precariously thin. Back in Hassan's cramped quarters, they huddled together, the weight of near discovery heavy on them. They had gathered substantial evidence, but it was far from enough. To dismantle KABBA, they needed not just proof of their criminal activities, but also a way to expose their network of corrupt collaborators. "We need someone on the inside," Omar said, his voice barely a whisper. "Someone with authority, someone who wouldn't dismiss this as a wild goose chase." Hassan pondered for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, a flicker of recognition lit up his eyes. "There's Captain Aaliyah," he said. "A woman of integrity, a sharp mind hidden beneath a veil. She might be our best chance." Chapter 5. Captain Aaliyah was a legend within the Mecca police force. Respectful whispers of her bravery and unwavering dedication followed her wherever she went. For Omar, a wide-eyed rookie with a backpack full of explosive allegations, approaching her felt like scaling Mount Everest in flip-flops. Hassan, ever the pragmatist, provided a ray of hope. He explained that Aaliyah, known for her unconventional methods, had once apprehended a notorious smuggler by posing as a pilgrim herself. If anyone could navigate the complexities of Hajj and the whispers within the police force, it was her. Omar, clutching his hastily assembled dossier of sketches and notes, found Aaliyah in a small, Spartan office tucked away in a corner of the police headquarters. She was a woman of striking presence, her steely gaze softened by a hint of weary compassion. As Omar poured out his story, detailing the hidden chamber, KABBA's operations, and his near discovery, Aaliyah remained impassive. Her silence stretched on, agonizingly long for Omar. Finally, when he finished, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on a map of Mecca sprawled across the desk. "An elaborate network of criminals operating under the guise of holy pilgrimage," she mused, her voice a low contralto. "It sounds like a fever dream." Omar's heart sank. Dismissal, just what he'd feared. But before he could plead his case further, a flicker of interest sparked in Aaliyah's steely eyes. "Tell me about Hassan," she said. Omar, surprised by the shift in focus, recounted his encounter with the old man, his role in exposing KABBA's activities. Aaliyah listened intently, a small smile playing on her lips as Omar described Hassan's near-encyclopedic knowledge of the service tunnels. "So, you have a source," she concluded, a hint of amusement in her voice. "A valuable one, it seems." Omar's hope reignited. He wasn't dismissed as delusional. Aaliyah was intrigued, but cautious. He launched into a passionate explanation of the potential consequences of KABBA's operation: the desecration of a holy city, the erosion of trust, the danger posed by their unknown network. Aaliyah's gaze softened further. She saw the raw conviction in Omar's eyes, the unwavering belief in his cause. She knew, perhaps better than anyone, the lengths to which greed and corruption could reach, even in the holiest of places. "This is a delicate operation, officer," she said, her voice firm but not unyielding. "One wrong move and we could lose everything." "But," she trailed off, a glint of determination hardening her features. "There's always a but, isn't there?" Omar held his breath. "What you've presented," she continued, tapping a finger on the map, "is a starting point. We need more proof, concrete evidence that wouldn't be dismissed as hearsay." Relief washed over Omar. He wasn't dismissed, just challenged. He had his chance. "I can get you that proof," he said, his voice regaining its strength. "But we'll need to act fast. KABBA may already be onto us." Aaliyah regarded him levelly. She knew the risks involved, the potential for a career-ending disaster. But the glint in Omar's eyes mirrored her own sense of justice. "All right, officer," she said, a hint of a smile gracing her lips. "Let's see what kind of trouble we can stir up together." A hesitant truce had been forged. Omar, the idealistic rookie, and Aaliyah, the seasoned veteran, were now united against a common enemy. But their fight was far from over. KABBA, a serpent coiled in the heart of Mecca, was still out there, waiting to strike. The next move, the evidence they needed. These were the keys to dismantling the network and bringing the criminals to light. But in a city teeming with pilgrims and hidden agendas, the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. Chapter 6. A tense silence hung in the air as Omar and Aaliyah huddled in Hassan's cramped quarters. The weight of their newfound partnership settled on them. Omar, fueled by a mixture of hope and trepidation, laid out his plan. He proposed a daring operation during the final day of Hajj, the day of Arafah, a day marked by intense prayer and sacrifice. It would be their busiest day, but also their best chance to catch KABBA off guard. "Here's the idea," Omar explained, spreading out a makeshift map of the service corridors beneath the mosque. He traced a path leading from Hassan's hidden passage to a discreet alcove overlooking KABBA's chamber. "We need to get evidence from inside their lair itself." Aaliyah's brow furrowed. Entering the chamber during such a critical time was a high-risk maneuver. Security would be at its tightest, the corridors overflowing with pilgrims and officials. "It's too dangerous," she said, her voice firm. "One wrong move and we could get caught, not just us, but Hassan too." Omar understood her concerns. He countered by proposing a two-pronged approach. While he and Aaliyah infiltrated the chamber to collect evidence, Hassan would act as a lookout, using his knowledge of the tunnels to warn them of any approaching danger. "We can be quick," Omar insisted. "Just enough to snag a sample of their stolen goods, a recording of their conversation, anything that proves their illegal activities." Aaliyah pondered his words. The potential reward was significant, dismantling a criminal network operating in the holiest city. But the consequences of failure were dire: public humiliation, potential violence from KABBA, and a stain on the sanctity of Hajj. The silence stretched on, broken only by the rhythmic hum of prayers drifting down from above. Finally, Aaliyah spoke, her voice resolute. "All right, Omar," she said, her gaze meeting his. "This is a crazy plan, but crazy might just work. But we need a backup plan, something in case things go south." Omar nodded eagerly. They spent the next few hours meticulously planning their operation, anticipating potential roadblocks and devising escape routes. Aaliyah, with her years of experience, offered invaluable insights on security protocols and crowd control measures. By the time the call to prayer for the day of Arafah echoed through Mecca, their plan was set. Disguised as ordinary pilgrims, they blended into the throngs of worshippers, their hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against their ribs. The Grand Mosque was a sea of white iron, a tapestry of faith woven from prayers and supplications. Omar and Aaliyah navigated the stifling crowds, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Every step felt fraught with danger, every glance a potential betrayal. They reached Hassan's hidden passage and squeezed through, the damp air a welcome respite from the oppressive heat. The labyrinth of tunnels was a maze of shadows and whispers, the only sound the rhythmic echoes of their footsteps. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the discreet alcove overlooking KABBA's chamber. From their vantage point, they could see the four men huddled around the now familiar table, piles of stolen goods and passports stacked before them. Omar's hands trembled slightly as he switched on the miniature recording device Aaliyah had procured. He needed to capture enough evidence to leave no room for doubt. Aaliyah, ever the pragmatist, kept a watchful eye on the corridor, ready to signal any sign of danger. Through the hidden opening, they witnessed KABBA's leader boast about their latest haul, a priceless artifact smuggled in by a trusted pilgrim. Their conversation confirmed all of Omar's suspicions, a network of willing collaborators who exploited the sanctity of Hajj for personal gain. Just as Omar reached for a small camera hidden in his sleeve to capture the stolen goods, a commotion erupted from the corridor. Hassan's frantic voice echoed through the narrow passage. A single, urgent word: security. Omar's blood ran cold. Their plan was unraveling faster than they could adapt. Aaliyah grabbed his arm, her voice a steely whisper. Go, now. They scrambled back through the tunnels, the faint click of approaching footsteps echoing in their ears. Their hearts hammered against their ribs as they raced through the darkness, adrenaline fueling their escape. They had the evidence they needed, but reaching safety was a whole new challenge. Chapter 7. Omar and Aaliyah burst out of the hidden passage, the clamor of prayers and supplications a deafening wave. The blinding sun beat down on them, momentarily disorienting. They were in the heart of the bustling crowds performing the tawaf, surrounded by oblivious pilgrims. Panting, they scanned the throngs, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The footsteps had faded, but they couldn't be sure if they had truly outrun KABBA's security. This way, Aaliyah hissed, pulling Omar through the dense crowd. They weaved between pilgrims, their white robes a perfect camouflage. Their destination a side entrance leading to a deserted courtyard used for cleaning supplies. They stumbled through the doorway, collapsing against the cool stone wall, gasping for breath. The sounds of prayer filtered in, a muffled hum against their pounding hearts. We made it, Omar croaked, his voice raw. Aaliyah nodded, a grim smile playing on her lips. They had escaped, but the ordeal had left them shaken. The near capture served as a stark reminder of the dangers they faced, the ruthless efficiency of KABBA. With trembling hands, Omar retrieved the recording device and camera from his hidden pockets. The evidence was secure, their secret weapon against the criminal network. A wave of relief washed over him, intertwined with a newfound resolve. Just then, a booming voice cut through the murmurs of prayer. Omar, Aaliyah. They looked up to see their immediate superior, Captain Rashid, his face etched with concern. He had heard about the commotion near the service corridors and had been searching for them ever since. Omar and Aaliyah exchanged a nervous glance. They couldn't expose their investigation here, not with thousands of pilgrims around them. Aaliyah quickly formulated a plan. Captain, she said, her voice calm despite her racing heart. We were separated from a group of pilgrims during Tawaf. We were just trying to find them. Captain Rashid's frown deepened. He knew something was amiss, but with the sanctity of Hajj paramount, he couldn't question them further in public. Stick together, he barked, and report to my office after the prayer. With a curt nod, Aaliyah ushered Omar back into the throngs of pilgrims. They completed the remaining circuits of the Tawaf, their minds a whirlwind of emotions. The evidence they had gathered was a bombshell, but exposing KABBA within the chaos of Hajj was a delicate dance. After the final circuit, as pilgrims began to disperse, Omar and Aaliyah finally had a chance to breathe. They retreated to a secluded corner of the mosque, huddled together. We have the proof, Omar whispered, a spark of defiance in his eyes. Now we need to take them down. Aaliyah nodded, a grim smile replacing her earlier anxiety. She had witnessed Omar's courage firsthand, his unwavering determination to bring KABBA to justice. He was much more than just a rookie, he was a force to be reckoned with. They spent the next few hours formulating their strategy. Aaliyah contacted a trusted colleague in the security forces, someone who wouldn't dismiss their claims as paranoia. Together, they meticulously reviewed the recording and photographs, piecing together a solid case against KABBA. The following morning, they presented their findings to a room filled with apprehensive officials. Omar laid out the evidence, his voice ringing with conviction. The recording played, exposing the true nature of KABBA's operations, their callous disregard for the sanctity of the holy city. The officials were stunned into silence. The evidence was undeniable, painting a picture of a criminal syndicate operating under the cloak of faith. Shame and anger flickered across their faces. This wasn't just an attack on the law, it was an attack on their faith, a betrayal of the very foundation of Mecca. A swift, coordinated operation followed. KABBA's members were apprehended in a series of raids throughout the city. Their stolen goods were recovered, and their network of corrupt collaborators exposed. As news of the takedown spread, a wave of relief washed over Mecca. The pilgrims, initially shocked, felt a renewed sense of security. The holiest city had been cleansed of a hidden evil. Omar and Aaliyah stood on the balcony of Captain Rashid's office, overlooking the Grand Mosque bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The city buzzed with an energy that felt different, lighter. "It's over," Omar said, his voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. Aaliyah placed a hand on his shoulder, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Not quite," she corrected. Chapter 8. The dismantling of KABBA sent shockwaves through Mecca. Pilgrims, initially shaken by the revelation of a criminal network operating within the holy city, expressed a mixture of relief and anger. News outlets around the world buzzed with the story, painting a stark picture of the audacious operation and the bravery of the officers who exposed it. Omar, once a wide-eyed rookie, found himself thrust into the spotlight. He was hailed as a hero, his name synonymous with the cleansing of Mecca. However, amidst the accolades, a nagging unease gnawed at him. Aaliyah, ever perceptive, saw the worry etched on his young face. "They are celebrating you, Omar," she said, her voice gentle as they stood overlooking the bustling Grand Mosque. "Don't let it cloud your judgment." Omar sighed. "It feels like a victory," he admitted, "but something feels incomplete." Aaliyah nodded in understanding. The takedown of KABBA was a significant win, but it was just one battle in a larger war. Corruption, like a tenacious weed, had deep roots that extended far beyond Mecca. "KABBA might be gone," Aaliyah said, her gaze unwavering, "but the network they operated within still exists. There will be others, tempted by greed and power." Omar knew she was right. The fight for the sanctity of Hajj, for the integrity of faith, was a continuous one. He had a taste of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface, and he wouldn't rest until it was truly eradicated. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Omar and Aaliyah, along with a dedicated task force, meticulously investigated KABBA's network, following the trail of money and influence. They unearthed a web of corrupt officials, both within the security forces and the religious hierarchy, who had turned a blind eye to KABBA's activities in exchange for a share of the spoils. The investigation was a delicate dance. Exposing these officials risked a public backlash, a loss of faith in the very institutions entrusted to protect the holy city. But Omar and Aaliyah, fueled by a shared sense of justice, persevered. One by one, the corrupt officials were brought to justice. Some faced legal repercussions, others were ostracized from their positions of power. It was a slow, painstaking process, but with each action, a message was sent: Mecca wouldn't tolerate those who sought to exploit its sanctity. As news of the ongoing investigation spread, a wave of introspection swept through the city. Religious leaders spoke out against corruption, pilgrims became more vigilant, and a sense of collective responsibility emerged. Omar, no longer a rookie, had become a symbol of this newfound vigilance. He received letters from pilgrims across the globe, expressing their gratitude and newfound faith in the integrity of Hajj. These messages fueled his resolve, reminding him of the importance of his work. One afternoon, while reviewing a confiscated KABBA ledger, Omar stumbled upon a name that sent a jolt through him: a prominent businessman, a pillar of the community, and a generous benefactor of several religious institutions. The name Yusuf sent a shiver down his spine. It was the same name that had been mentioned during the KABBA meeting in the tunnels, the man who had expressed unease about the special package. A cold dread settled in Omar's stomach. Could Yusuf be more than just a wealthy benefactor? Could he be the mastermind behind KABBA, the one pulling the strings from the shadows? The discovery opened a whole new chapter in their investigation. Following this lead, Omar and Aaliyah embarked on a treacherous path, one that would test their courage and force them to confront a chilling truth: faith is a powerful weapon, but so is its exploitation. The fight for the soul of Mecca was far from over. Watch out for what is yet to unfold as the story continues in Part 2. This is the production of Matroid Movies.
Allah